I realize that now, Michael said grimly. But at the time, I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Dad has never outright lied to us before. I laughed, the sound bitter even to my own ears. Hasn't he? Or have we just never caught him before? Michael looked troubled. Maybe. Anyway, it wasn't until Sunday dinner, when I saw your genuine shock, that I realized something was very wrong. And then afterwards, when I came here to apologize, what you said about the different treatment between us, it made me think. About what? About patterns. About how Dad has always pitted us against each other in subtle ways. Remember the college fund? How he made it seem like there was only enough for one of us to attend a private university? I nodded slowly. I had chosen the state school, allowing Michael to accept his dream offer from Princeton. There was plenty of money for both of us, Michael continued, his voice tight with anger. I found out years later when I was helping organize their financial paperwork during the estate planning. They could have sent us both anywhere we wanted. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Why would he do that? Competition, Michael said simply. Dad believes in it. Thinks it makes people stronger, more resourceful. He did the same thing to his brother, you know. Uncle James? I asked, surprised. Our father's brother had died when we were children, and Dad rarely spoke of him. Michael nodded. Sarah's parents know the whole story. Apparently, there was a family business, a small but successful manufacturing company. Grandpa promised it to both sons, said they'd run it together. But when he died, Dad somehow convinced the executor that he should have sole control. That's ruthless, I said, struggling to reconcile this information with the father I thought I knew. It's how he sees the world, Michael replied. Resources are finite. Success means getting your share before someone else does. And family is no exception. We sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the implications of this family history we'd never been told. So what happened with Uncle James? I finally asked. Michael's expression darkened. He started another company, became Dad's competitor. They barely spoke for years. The reconciliation happened only when James got sick. The cancer that eventually killed him. Another piece of family mythology crumbled. I'd always been told that James died unexpectedly, that there had been no chance for goodbyes. The idea that our father had withheld this truth, had rewritten our own family history, was profoundly disturbing. Does Mom know about all this? I asked. I think she knows pieces, Michael said carefully, but Mom has always been skilled at seeing only what she wants to see when it comes to Dad. I took a long sip of wine, trying to process everything. So where does that leave us? With the house, I mean. Michael looked me directly in the eyes. The house is yours, Alex. It always should have been. I'm withdrawing completely from Dad's offer. In fact, I called him this afternoon and told him so. You did? I couldn't hide my surprise. Yes, and you should have heard him. He was pleased. Said it showed moral fiber to recognize when something rightfully belonged to someone else. Michael shook his head in disbelief. It's like he's been playing some elaborate game all along, with rules only he understands. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by suspicion. Wait, is that why Dad showed me the transfer papers with my name? Because he already knew you'd backed out? Probably, Michael admitted. But I think he also realized he'd pushed too far this time. When I told him I was backing out, he actually apologized, said he'd miscalculated how important the house was to you. Miscalculated? I repeated incredulously, as if my home were just another variable in one of his equations. The next morning, my doorbell rang promptly at 9. I opened it to find both my parents standing there, Mom clutching a large manila envelope, Dad looking uncharacteristically uncomfortable. "May we come in?" Mom asked, her voice tentative. "We have something important to discuss." I gestured them inside, bracing myself for another confrontation. But as we settled in the living room, I was struck by my mother's demeanor. Not defensive or placating as usual, but strangely resolute. "Alex, I owe you an apology," she began, surprising me. "Not just for the house situation, but for years of allowing your father to manipulate family dynamics in ways that have hurt you." Dad shifted in his seat, but didn't interrupt. "What your father did, pitting you against Michael, creating artificial scarcity, making you fight for things that should have been freely given. It's a pattern I've enabled for far too long." "Why?" I asked simply. Mom glanced at Dad before continuing. "Because it's how he was raised. Because he genuinely believes it builds character. And because—" she hesitated. "Because it's easier to go along than to fight," Dad finished unexpectedly. "Your mother has called me out on this behavior many times over the years, but I've always convinced her that my way was best, that a little hardship, a little competition, was good for my children." "And now," I prompted, "and now I see that I've damaged my relationship with my son," he admitted, looking genuinely troubled. "That in trying to make you stronger, I've pushed you to the point where you were ready to publicly denounce your own family. I wasn't quite ready to let him off the hook. It wasn't about making me stronger, Dad. It was about control, about ensuring I lived my life according to your values, your timeline." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps you're right. I've always found your life choices difficult to understand. The focus on career over family, the seemingly endless string of relationships that go nowhere." "Richard," Mom interrupted sharply, "we agreed not to do this." "I'm not criticizing," Dad protested. "I'm acknowledging that I've struggled to accept Alex's path because it's so different from what I envisioned. And in that struggle, I've been unfair, discriminatory, as your lawyer so pointedly put it." It was perhaps the closest thing to a genuine apology I would ever get from Richard Harrington. I felt a complicated mix of vindication and lingering resentment. "So what happens now?" I asked. Mom handed me the manila envelope. "These are the final transfer papers for the house, with your name as the recipient. All they need is your signature, and the property will be legally yours." I opened the envelope slowly, half expecting another trick or test. But the documents inside were exactly as described. A clean, straightforward transfer of ownership from my parents to me. "There's something else you should know," Mom added as I reviewed the papers. "Something about Aunt Maggie's original intentions for the house." "What about her intentions?" I asked, suddenly alert. Aunt Maggie had been more than a relative. She'd been a mentor, a kindred spirit, who understood my passion for design and architecture in a way my parents never had. Mom reached into her purse and pulled out a faded envelope. "Maggie left this with her will, with instructions that it should be opened 5 years after her death. That would be next month. But under the circumstances, I think we should open it now." She handed me the envelope, my name written on the front, in Aunt Maggie's distinctive handwriting. With slightly trembling hands, I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. "My dear Alex, if you're reading this, then 5 years have passed since I left this world. 5 years in which, I hope, you've come to appreciate the Oakwood house as I did, not just as a structure of wood and stone, but as a canvas for your dreams, a shelter for your spirit. When I decided to leave the house to your parents, rather than directly to you, It wasn't because I trusted them more with its care. It was because I wanted to be sure you were ready for the responsibility, that you would truly value it, not just accept it as an expected inheritance. Richard promised me he would transfer the property to you when the time was right. I made him swear it, in fact, knowing his tendency to control rather than nurture. If he has honored that promise, then this letter is simply confirmation of what you already know. If not, well, then perhaps it's time for you to fight for what is rightfully yours. The house has always been meant for you, Alex. From the moment you were born, I saw in you a spirit that understood what makes a house a home. Not its market value or its status, but the love and creativity poured into every corner. I hope you'll keep it in the family. Perhaps pass it on one day to someone who appreciates its character as you do. But regardless of what you decide, know that it is yours to choose. Your parents were merely trustees of a gift I always intended for you. With all my love, Aunt Maggie. I looked up from the letter, too stunned to speak. Dad's expression was unreadable, but Mom's eyes shone with unshed tears. "She made us promise," Mom said softly. "Made your father swear on his honor that the house would eventually go to you. It was never supposed to be Michael's." "Then why the charade?" I demanded, anger flaring anew. "Why put me through this emotional wringer if the outcome was predetermined?" Dad cleared his throat. "Because a promise made to a dying woman isn't the same as you earning what's yours. I wanted you to fight for it, to prove to yourself as much as to me that you were worthy of Maggie's gift." "That wasn't your decision to make," I said coldly. "Aunt Maggie thought I was worthy. That should have been enough." "You're right," Dad admitted, surprising me again. "I overstepped, turned a straightforward inheritance into a test of character you didn't need to pass. For that, I am truly sorry." After my parents left, I sat alone in the living room, Aunt Maggie's letter still in my hands, trying to reconcile all I had learned. The house had always been intended for me. My father's manipulations, while inexcusable, hadn't changed the ultimate outcome. And yet, something fundamental had shifted in my understanding of my family and myself. For years, I had accepted the subtle devaluation of my choices, the implication that my single status made me somehow less deserving of family resources and support. I had internalized the idea that without a spouse and children, my needs were inherently less important than Michael's. No more. My phone buzzed with a text from Ms. Menendez. "Any updates on your situation? Should we proceed with additional legal measures?" I smiled as I replied, "The house will be transferred to me after all. But I'd like to continue our conversation about advocacy for single individuals. This issue is bigger than just my family." Her response came quickly. "I couldn't agree more. Let's meet next week to discuss possibilities." Over the following days, as the property transfer was finalized and the house became legally mine, I found myself thinking about Aunt Maggie's words repeatedly. She had seen something in me from childhood, a particular understanding of home, of nurturing spaces, of creating sanctuaries. It was a gift I had always possessed, but never fully acknowledged. Michael visited again, this time with Sarah and the twins. There was a new easiness between us, as if the competition that had subtly shaped our relationship for decades had finally been named and therefore diffused. "We brought a housewarming gift," Sarah said with a smile, handing me a beautifully wrapped package. "Even though you've been living here for years, it seemed appropriate to celebrate it officially becoming yours." Inside was a hand-carved wooden sign reading Harrington Haven, with my address beneath it. "The girls helped pick it out," Michael explained as the twins beamed proudly. They think everyone should have a name for their home. I love it, I said sincerely, touched by the gesture. After they left, I hung the sign by my front door, then spent the evening walking through each room of my house, truly mine now, in both law and spirit. In the study, surrounded by books and architectural drawings, I opened my laptop and began to write. Single discrimination: how our families and society devalue unmarried adults. The title appeared at the top of my document, bold and unapologetic. Over the next several weeks, what had begun as personal catharsis evolved into a manifesto of sorts, a detailed examination of the ways single adults are systematically disadvantaged, from family resource distribution to workplace expectations to housing policies. Ms. Menendez introduced me to colleagues involved in advocacy work. I started attending meetings of a group focused on housing equality, sharing my story as an example of how even well-intentioned families can perpetuate harmful norms. 6 months after the confrontation in my father's office, my article was published in a major online magazine. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of comments, shares, and personal messages from single adults who had experienced similar discrimination, who had felt devalued and delegitimized because of their relationship status. Your words gave voice to something I've felt my entire adult life, but couldn't articulate. I shared this with my parents, who have always prioritized my married sister's needs over mine. We had our first honest conversation about it today. As a widowed father, I've experienced this shift in how family treats me, from valued spouse and parent to somehow incomplete again. The article went viral, leading to television interviews, speaking engagements, and eventually an offer to expand it into a book. My professional life remained focused on architectural engineering, but my advocacy work became an equally important passion. Perhaps the most surprising outcome was the gradual transformation in my relationship with my parents, particularly my father. The public attention my article received could have driven a permanent wedge between us. Exposure of family dysfunction was exactly what he had feared and what I had threatened. Instead, it sparked a series of difficult but necessary conversations about expectations, worth, and the many valid forms a fulfilling life can take. One evening, nearly a year after the house transfer, Dad showed up at my door unannounced. He looked older somehow, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. "I've been reading your book draft," he said without preamble as I invited him in. "Your mother shared it with me." I tensed, preparing for criticism or anger. The manuscript was unflinching in its examination of familial discrimination, though I had changed names and specific details to protect privacy. "It's excellent work," he continued, surprising me. "Thought-provoking, challenging, and painfully accurate." We sat in my living room as twilight gathered outside, speaking more honestly than we ever had before, about his own upbringing under a ruthlessly competitive father, about his fears that without pushing, without creating artificial scarcity, his children might lack motivation, about his genuine difficulty understanding life choices different from his own. "I'm not sure I'll ever fully understand the path you've chosen," he admitted as our conversation wound down. "But I'm trying to accept that it's not my place to understand, only to respect." It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Years of complicated family dynamics couldn't be resolved in a single evening. But it was a beginning, a foundation upon which to build a more authentic relationship. As Dad left that night, he paused on the porch, looking back at the house that had become the catalyst for so much change. "Your Aunt Maggie would be proud," he said quietly, "not just of how you've made this place your own, but of how you've found your voice. She always said you were the one who would break the pattern. 2 years after the Sunday dinner that upended my life, the Harrington Haven is truly my sanctum. A place where I've hosted community meetings, written most of my now published book, and yes, even welcomed a few promising romantic prospects, though I no longer feel any pressure to settle down on anyone else's timeline. Michael and Sarah remain happily ensconced in their riverside home, their investment portfolio diversified through means that didn't involve displacing their brother. The twins, now 7, are regular visitors to Uncle Alex's house, especially the backyard workshop, where I've been teaching them basic carpentry skills. My relationship with my parents continues to evolve, sometimes forward, occasionally backward, always complicated. Mom has become one of my strongest allies, often sharing my articles with her friends and proudly attending my speaking engagements. Dad tries in his own way, though old habits of control and judgment sometimes resurface. Most importantly, I've found purpose in advocating for a more inclusive understanding of family, worthiness, and resource distribution, one that values individuals for who they are, not for their adherence to traditional relationship structures. The house that was nearly taken from me has become more than just my home. It's a symbol of standing up against discrimination, of claiming one's rightful place, of redefining family relationships on more equitable terms. As Aunt Maggie knew all along, it's not the legal ownership of a property that matters most. It's the recognition that every person deserves a sanctuary, a place to belong, regardless of whether they face life solo or with a partner by their side. Tonight, as I sit on my porch swing watching the sunset cast golden light across my garden, I feel a profound gratitude, not just for this house, but for the difficult journey that led me to a deeper understanding of my own worth. The betrayal that once seemed unforgivable has transformed into an unexpected gift. The strength to stand firm in my truth, to claim what is rightfully mine, and to help others do the same. Family relationships may be complicated, traditions may be entrenched, but one truth remains clear. No one, married or single, parent or child-free, deserves to be valued less because of their relationship status. And I'll keep fighting until that truth is recognized, one family conversation at a time. If you've experienced similar discrimination as a single person, share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters, and together we can change these harmful patterns for good.